It's the true choice. It's the person that needs to be in my life. It's the person nature wanted me to be with, in the sense that she and I are nature. And it was very different before. It's a totally different way of relating to each other, to yourself, to the world. Very peaceful. And everything happens naturally, effortlessly. Giving an interview to you, I've been speaking for 3 hours and 15 minutes. More actually, because I started recording later.
I'm cognizant of your time, and I apologize.
And it is
and the
flowing.
audience,
It's flowing
audience
effortlessly.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm trying to say. It flows effortlessly. My books flow, not effortlessly. Now I will confess to that. Giving birth to a book is like giving birth. It's painful. It wakes me up at 3 in the morning and puts me in front of this computer at 3 in the morning, even if I have to wake up at 7, go to work the next day. Every book, it's like a cosmic responsibility. Because it's like a ball of hot iron that comes up your esophagus, and you need to spit it out. And the only way to spit it out is to finish it. And now it's easier because I don't resist it. If that's what's going to come tomorrow, then that's what's going to be. And so let it be. So there is freedom in what philosophers of old would say, the slavery to the daimon. And the daimon is that superior force that forces you to do things in life as a philosopher.
Oh, daemon.
So,
like, okay,
a daemon, like
diamond.
Aristotle had daimon or daemon, depends on the spelling. Aristotle had a daemon who told him what not to do. There are other philosophers who have a daemon. Socrates, sorry. Mm. And there are other philosophers that have a daemon that tell them what to do. Surrendering to slavery towards my daemon has been the ultimate freedom. So the freedom is not the ego winning over, stealing the god from the fire, stealing the fire from the gods and making the universe what it wants to be. That's impossible because the ego doesn't even exist. It's a psychological configuration. It's a psychological phenomenon in the pejorative sense of the meaning. Meaning it's not really there. It's just something your mind is making up. That's what it is. So how can it control the world? It's not really there to begin with. How can something that doesn't exist control what does exist? So freedom for me has not been achieved through the mastery of control, although I thought I had mastered control by the time I was 34. I was the youngest, I think I was the youngest executive in my company, which is one of the top 50 companies in Europe. It is not a small company at all.
Congratulations.
I'm not going to name the company, but a very, very, very large and important company. If that company ceased to exist tomorrow, you would have no new phones, computers, or iPads for at least 5 years, probably 10. So I had that illusion when I was 34. Now I control life. Now I have money, I have a beautiful house, I have a beautiful wife, a great job, I have power.
You had a wife before you were married?
I had a wife before I had my current partner. Yeah, and my ex-wife is still a very close friend. We are not enemies at all, on the contrary. But we're not married anymore. Mm-hmm. And then it's like instantly after I got that promotion and bought the house in which I live today, which for Dutch standards is a wonderful, large, expensive house. And that I thought, okay, now I arrived. Now I have control. I have the house, I have the wife, I have the money, I have the position, the power, I have everything. And then it's amazing how life immediately cuts your bullshit short.
Right.
Through illness. I thought, well, my wife then and I discovered a mass in her breast. And it took 2 weeks for the doctors to confirm that it was benign. It was nothing to worry about. But during those 2 weeks, we lived with the reality that it was probably cancer. And that was nature telling me, you think you're in control? Just because you have a high position, a beautiful house, and money in the bank? Let me show you what control is. I would take from you what you care most about. Or at least I will have you think that I would take from you what you care most about. And at the end of the day, it was not cancer. She's alive and healthy today. But the message was not lost on me. We are never, ever in control. We don't even exist, let alone be in control. You are never in control. You are like a mayfly. You are an ephemeral little doing of nature that will stop being done in no time. Before you even think, boom, it's over.
Thank you.
And you have absolutely no control, buddy. And if you think you have, you're in for a lot of disappointment and suffering. And the freedom I found was in, hey, embracing this. Bernardo doesn't even exist. Of course, he's not in control. I am a doing. I am a process. Something wants to manifest through this doing. And as the doing, I'm not going to resist it. I'll let it through. And look, if it works, great. If it doesn't work, it's not my problem either. Because the same argument that tells you you're not in control also tells you you do not really have ultimate responsibility. That's not a license for immoral or dysfunctional behavior. That's not a license for dysfunctional behavior or criminal behavior. Let me repeat it. It's not a license for that. It just tells you if you regret anything, you're deluding yourself because you didn't choose what you regret either. Something worked through you. Something needed to happen through your actions. So, the illusion of control is as much an illusion, and for the same reasons, of the illusion of regret. So,
yeah, I don't understand that last point about regret.
You can only regret things if you think you really had a choice and you made the wrong one.
Right.
Now, if you understand that there was a natural process unfolding, of which the thing you consider to be yourself was just a small part, and that the boundaries between that and the rest, it's just a narrative in your head, and a mental configuration that is conducive to that narrative, then no regret. What is there to regret? It's not your show.
See,
know what I mean?
This is where I'm thinking about what's the confluence between the Judeo-Christian ethic and then the East, and I see overlap and then I see disparity. So one is the surrendering. That seems to be common to all religions. Now, in Christianity, it's like surrender to the truth. And that's
surrender
something
I
try. Yeah, but Jesus is synonymous with the truth and love.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus is the word, the logos. So surrender to Jesus seems like something very concrete and personal. It's saying the same thing that the Eastern guys are saying. All there is the void. You don't even exist. It's the same bloody thing.
But even the rationalists too, where the rationalists talk about, well, all I follow is logic. Well, the root word of logic is logos. And you hear what they say about logic. It's almost equivalent to what Christians have to say about Jesus. That is, it's all pervading. Oh God, it's all pervading. It's a natural order. You cannot go against it. Okay, well, you can go against it actually, but it's deleterious if you go against it. Just like some rationalists will say, well, if that's illogical, dismiss that. Okay, so then the surrendering to the truth. Okay, that's something I try to live my life by. I do like that. I do like I hope that I do live by that. And then the truth has to be selected by something. What I mean by that is that there's an infinite amount of truths to choose from, so you have to have some selection mechanism. And then that selection mechanism has to be, well, I conceptualize it as love. So of all the truths, so here's one way of talking about it. Someone close to me said, I wanted to tell my partner she's as cold as a rock, something like that. And then I was thinking, well, you shouldn't say that. And then I think I said that, then he said, but it's true. And it's like, well, it is true, because she is cold. She is as cold as a rock. But it's not loving. And there's plenty you could say. So why would you select that one? Okay, so there's that. You surrender to the truth. I like that. And then in Christianity, there is an emphasis on slavery in the sense that be a slave to a higher master. And then that can obviously get distorted and being used for actual slavery.
You nailed it. Right, nailed it. You hit it in the head in your first words. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, but then here's the difference. You said regret. And regret is something that we did not choose. But in the Christian ethic, I would
You'll
imagine...
be punished for your choices, yeah.
Yes. You choose correctly. And you can regret, and that's fine. Don't make that same mistake again. And as long as you don't make it again, as long as you want to live your life by not making that mistake again, that's forgiveness. You don't need to regret it. If you regret it, well, who are you to even regret it? Jesus forgives you. You know better than Jesus. So in some way, you can let go of regret like that. So it's complementary, but then the East and the West. But then I see the differences.
I think all religious traditions that have moved a significant number of people in our history, they have the power they have, the power to compel people to move in a certain way. They have that power because they are touching on something true. Although amenable to wild misinterpretation. But at the source, it's pure. At the source, it is the truth. And what you just said, in Christianity, it's all about surrendering to a higher power. And that's exactly, and I can recognize what happened in my life over the past year as an instance of that. Because by admitting and facing the reality that Bernardo Kastrup not only is not in control, has never been, but is not really even there, that was my freedom. It's this recognition that is freeing. Not the freedom of control, but the freedom of surrendering to a higher power. And that higher power is what I really am. It's nature as it wants to manifest through me. Mm-hmm. So I recognize the Christian message.
You're surrendering to yourself.
You're surrendering
like
to what you
self,
actually
like the
are.
Truest
your natural self, as
self,
opposed to your adaptive self. Your socially adaptive self.
Because it sounds selfish. It sounds narcissistic. Like I'm surrendering to myself. I'll do what I will. But the I is not the same as... Yeah.
It's the precise opposite of that.
So why do you think... Sorry to interrupt, but this is like... And I know you got to go, man. Like I've kept you on for way too long. And I'm... Like I should get going at some point too. But why do you think it is that the East managed to get the metaphysic correct?
It's an older culture?
It just by chance? Yeah, no, I know. But what is it about that just begs the question, right?
This is a dangerous path because it starts getting into, do different so-called races have different potentials, and I don't even acknowledge scientifically the existence of a race. So I'm not going to say that there's something special about the peoples of the subcontinent. I don't think that would be a statement I would espouse. Yeah. But I do recognize that for whatever reason, it has happened there, and the true understanding of it still seems to occur more often there to this darn day. Now, I would not offer you an explanation along genetic lines of superiority or anything, because I don't believe in this kind of explanations. But yeah, it's a confluence in nature that happened to happen there and still happening there. And you might think, well, it's a long time for it to be just a confluence. It's not. It's 3,500 years. It's the blink of an eye. It's less than the blink of an eye. It's like nothing. And it may be different next time around. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We will not be around in this form to see that in this form. So I do not know why there. That period of time is called the axial age. And it's a mystery why then, and why in many parts of the world, but particularly stronger than anywhere else, and arguably truer than anywhere else, that this happened in the Indus Valley. And the only explanation I can conceive is it's an older culture, which is true. It's an older culture, where the subcontinent was when Europe was in the Dark Ages. It's not a very flattering comparison for Europe.
You're talking about minus 3000 BC?
No, I'm talking about already the Dark Ages in Europe, the period between 400 and 1400, when intellectual development stopped in Europe, social development stopped, and Europe was in the Dark Ages. In the subcontinent, it was not dark. In the Muslim world, it was not dark either. Actually, it was a sort of renaissance of arts, crafts, and science in the Muslim world. So, the torch of wisdom and intellectual development is hand over across the world in different epochs. I do acknowledge that metaphysical understanding seems to particularly correlate with the subcontinent, for whatever reason. And I don't know. I will tell you this. If I were someone from the subcontinent... you are from the subcontinent, aren't you? Your surname...
Well, my background is West Indian, so I'm from Trinidad, and then I am an immigrant to Toronto, so I came here when I was a baby.
Yeah, okay. So you have that background. If I had that background, I'll not... How will I get across by saying that? If I had that background, I would be proud.
Oh, that's nice.
I'll put it that way. But that doesn't mean that I intellectually think that the races are superior. I think this is nonsense. I don't think there are even races.
I wasn't going to go there. Well, what I was wondering is, so one explanation is by chance. And the reason it's by chance is we can say that it's been around for 3,000 years, so it can't be by chance because that's too long. But then at the same time is relative. Like it's a blink in the eye. Who knows? Another roll of the dice, maybe African culture would have come up with Christianity and vice versa and so on, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool.
It's
But
not
then,
only that it arose there. I mean, it popped elsewhere. It popped in Western culture as well. Parmenides arguably was an idealist, if you interpret him correctly, as
is that a pre-Socratic?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
So
Sounds like a
popped,
pre-Socratic.
it popped elsewhere. So it's not exclusive to the subcontinent. What makes the subcontinent special is that it was conducive to its spread and adoption. Instead of popping in the minds of one and another and then disappearing like in the West, there it popped and took hold. So there was an easier recognition of that. And yeah, was that cultural? I don't know. It predates ASOC. So you can't even make historical arguments about the alignment of philosophy and state power because it precedes that. So I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, I know you got to get going. So how about I just read to you a few questions and then you answer them quickly? Because there are some audience questions. So one, you mentioned that materialism, if we guide ourselves by that, we're doomed. I'm curious, is there no case to be made for ethics under materialism? Like some would say, like Marxists?
I think morals and ethics are practical, useful constructs, and there is just as good a case for a functional moral and ethics under materialism as there is under any other metaphysics. So yes, I don't think an argument against materialism is that it's not conducive to ethics. I don't think that is true. I think we can live ethically and morally also under materialism. I think materialism is killing for meaning, for our sense of meaning and for our understanding of our place in nature. Materialism is killing for that. It's a nihilistic philosophy, but it's not a philosophy that makes functional morals and ethics impossible. I don't think that is the case, and I think it's a fallacious argument against materialism. In other words, I don't think a materialist is necessarily a bad person.
What is the weakest point of your theory / worldview? So that is, if someone was to put a crack in it, where would they most likely to be successful putting a crack in?
It's an explicit conceptual account of exactly what dissociation is. We know it exists because of empirical reasons. It is happening. We have neuroimaging studies of people with dissociation. We know the dreams they report, that they can experience the dreams from different point of views depending on the alter. So we know that the process exists that is necessary to explain nature. So it is there. We know empirically. But we do not have an explicit, completely internally consistent conceptual account of it. That's the weakest point. I would say that's not a reason to reject idealism, because whether we have a conceptual account of it or not, we know the process exists. So this is an epistemic question with very little force. Whether we can account for it or not, we know it exists. Accountability is an issue when you're postulating things that you don't know whether they exist or not. Then you have to describe them explicitly and completely for us to check the plausibility of it. But when nature is already showing us this happens, that's all we need. But I would admit that we lack a complete and internally consistent conceptual account of exactly what dissociation is.
What makes something living versus not, conscious versus not? So is a brick alive, and how do we have a way of drawing that boundary? Is there something special about biological life? What are the conditions? You just mentioned this, right? Like, what are the conditions for the sophisticated dissociation, let's say?
I think all biology is the image of a dissociative process in the natural mind, so to say, or universal consciousness, if I use some terms co-opted by the New Age. I think all matter is the image of inner mental processes. The question is, what counts as a dissociated alter and what is just part of the rest of mind at large as a whole? Because mind at large technically is also an alter. In other words, after you eliminate every living being, what remains is itself an alter, because it's dissociated from the living beings. So if there is a dissociative boundary, there is an alter. And any boundary divides a space in two. So when you have a boundary, you have at least two alters already. So at the birth of the first living being in the history of the universe, there were two alters, the living being and all the rest, which was dissociated from the living being. Dissociation is two ways.
To stop you, I'm trying to understand. You're making a distinction between living and mind. So can you experience without living?
Yes. I think the rest of the universe, the inanimate universe, everything that remains after you remove every living being, everything that remains is itself a conscious entity.
Okay, Bernardo, sorry, I'm trying to understand. So forgive me if I just keep interrupting. Okay, are you making a connection between living beings and self-conscious beings, or are those two separate? Like
Yes,
self-conscious. Okay,
I
sorry.
think only the alters that correspond to living beings have developed self-consciousness, because you need evolution by natural selection in the framework of a planetary ecosystem for this to evolve. So I don't think mind at large, in other words, the parts of universal consciousness that are dissociated from all living beings, what remains of the universe after you account for all living beings, I don't think mind at large is self-conscious, because it didn't undergo the pressures of natural selection in a planetary ecosystem. It had no reason to need to evolve that higher order mental ability. But I think it is conscious, because all there is consciousness. And you may call it God if you want. It's certainly omnipresent and probably omniscient, even though not self-reflective. And also omnipotent, although not in a premeditated way. So I'm fine if you want to call that God, with the caveat that that's what I mean by the word God and not anything else. And it is conscious too. So, and what does it look like from our perspective? It looks like the inanimate universe. Stars, galaxies, quasars, black holes, moons, asteroids, everything that is non-living around us is the body of mind at large. In other words, it's what the inner mentation of mind at large looks like when observed from across our dissociative boundary. It's what the mental inner life of mind at large looks like to us in the dashboard of our sensory organs. So all matter is just the image of conscious inner life, whether it corresponds to a living being or not. And here I'm restricting the term life to dissociated alters. And the inanimate universe, in that sense, is not alive because it's not an organism, but it has mental inner life, conscious inner life. And now I'm using the word life in a broader sense. It is conscious, but it's not a living organism in the restrictive definition of a living organism as something that metabolizes. The inanimate universe does not metabolize. But I do think it has conscious inner life. And that the matter of the inanimate universe is what that conscious inner life looks like in the dashboard of the dials that we use to collect information from what's outside our altar, on the other side of our dissociative boundary. So everything betrays the presence of consciousness. Literally everything. The question is what betrays the presence of dissociated conscious processes? Then I would say only living beings do that. This bottle does not have a conscious inner life in and of itself, the way you have a conscious inner life in and of itself. I think this bottle is part of the broad image we call the inanimate universe. And the inanimate universe is conscious as a whole. In other words, there is no bottle. It's a linguistic differentiation we make. The only ontologically distinct things are living beings. Why? Because I feel if I pinch my skin, and I don't feel it if I pinch my screen. So there is an ontological boundary defining my altar, and that is the boundaries of what I can directly feel. I don't feel photons hitting against a wall, but I feel photons hitting against my retina. So there is an ontic way to say this is something separate. But we do not have any reason to pronounce that a car is separate, that a road is separate, that an empty bottle of water is separate. These are linguistic distinctions. We call it nominal separations. They are merely nominal. We apply these for convenience, so we can communicate more easily if I want to buy a car.
Pragmatics.
But the car is continuous with the rest of the inanimate universe. If you take away the road and the gravity that pulls the car against the road, the car doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't move. If you take away the air that allows for combustion in the engine, it doesn't even fire. So there is no proper grounds for distinguishing between inanimate objects. So if you ask me, does the bottle have a conscious inner life of its own? I would say no, because the bottle isn't even a bottle. It's a nominal distinction we make. There is only the inanimate universe as a whole. And that, yes, that has a conscious inner life of its own, dissociated from us.
What type of logic do you subscribe to? Classical, intuitionist, so on
I am
so on?
I am an intuitionist. I think the law of excluded middle although seems to be very intuitive, it is not well formed. I think it doesn't survive proper scrutiny. I think existence can only be demonstrated by the production of an example of that which you want to say exists, as opposed to abstractly proving the impossibility of non-existence. If you use the words intuitionist, then you know what I'm talking about. Maybe for the benefit of the audience. The law of excluded middle says that either something is true or false. It cannot be both. Either something exists or it doesn't exist. It cannot do both. So by proving that something cannot be false, you indirectly prove it to be true. That's Aristotelian logic. If you reject the law of excluded middle, then proving the impossibility of something being false does not prove that it's true. An intuitionist would say you can only prove it to be true if you produce an instance of it, if you construct it. And I think that that's what is ultimately true. Mind at large does not follow the law of excluded middle. I think people who undergo experiences of altered states, they come back and say that was completely illogical but so real. What they are referring to is that the law of excluded middle didn't apply, so Aristotelian logic didn't apply. But things exist by virtue of an instance of them being produced. In other words, things only exist when they actually exist, as opposed to their abstract non-existence being disproven according to some conceptual system, formal system. So I reject that, and I'm an intuitionist.
Yeah, not to lower in estimation your suffering from tinnitus, but if you think that's bad, try having a math professor who's an intuitionist logic person making you construct from scratch and not allow proofs by contradiction.
There you go.
Okay, so you also mentioned one time when you were talking to Steve Patterson from Patterson Pursuits, or Patterson in Pursuit, that what we're doing right now, me and you, we're speaking in the domain of rationality and reason and logic, evidence, so on and so on. Rupert Spira, who you would speak to, wouldn't even buy into that game. You're playing in a different arena. But you said that you said that what you're doing is, this is the norm, so you have to play in this game, but you ultimately believe it's incomplete, and this is not the game we should be playing. So to make an analogy, it would be like you're trying to best someone at soccer to show them that basketball is better. So then what I'm wondering is, okay, so what is the game of all games?
The game of all games is knowledge by acquaintance, not knowledge by conceptualization. Concepts only point at something, but they are not the thing they are pointing at.
Right.
So to know the truth conceptually means that you know the direction it's pointing to, but you're not acquainted with the truth until it's embodied. So you may be convinced that something is true, but it's not in your body and doesn't change your life and doesn't make you feel differently. So you may be intellectually convinced materialism is false, but you still may dread the oblivion of your consciousness coming upon death. In other words, you didn't embody your intellectual conclusion. What's governing your emotional life, it's something else. It's not your intellectual conclusion. The conclusion didn't sink from here down to the emotional self. So it's not really transformative. It's not guiding your life. Now, I play purely an intellectual game. Rupert plays the game of embodied truth. He's not trying to convince you intellectually at all. He completely bypasses that. He neglects that. He's trying to bring you truth by acquaintance. In other words, if you experience oneness, you do not need a narrative that tells you that oneness is true. You've been there. It's in you. No, you short-circuit it. You bypass it. That's his game. And it's the only game that is truly transformative, that will really change your life. Everything else is in the head. It doesn't sink into the rest. So why do I play the intellectual game? Because I think that a lot of people who are perfectly capable of knowing the truth by acquaintance and who would have known the truth by acquaintance don't, because their intellect is the bouncer of their heart. They will not give themselves permission to be acquainted with what's true because the intellect is telling them, no, this cannot be true. And that's that evil little voice, like, this cannot be true. It cannot be the case. So it's not. And that closes you up. And it amputates a huge part of your mind, of your capability to experience what's actually going on. It is shut off by an intellectual conclusion, which is not in itself transformative, but it can amputate the degrees of freedom that your true inner life, your emotion inner life, would otherwise have. It cuts up the map and offers you a much more restricted territory that you can explore, and makes you blind and inaccessible to the rest. And therefore, it precludes you from becoming acquainted with what is true, because you don't give yourself intellectual permission to become acquainted with it. So I play the intellectual game because I want to help people give themselves the intellectual permission to explore the fullness of their nature as living beings, as dissociated alters, because the dissociated alter, while it's alive, it's dissociated. But even in that state of dissociation, it can become acquainted with things that our mainstream cultural narrative categorically today says are either impossible, or if they actually happen, illusory, and therefore should be dismissed and not taken seriously. And that is the greatest tragedy of our age, that not only do we know where the solutions lie, but that we actually every now and then experience the solution, but dismiss it because of this pernicious cultural narrative that tells us what can and cannot be true.
You mentioned, you had a great phrase. I don't know if you just came up with it. The intellectual side is the bouncer of the heart.
Yeah, I often use this phrase.
Okay, that's a great one. I haven't heard that. Now, should the heart be the ultimate adjudicator? That is, don't let the authoritative judgment go to the intellect, but only let it be the heart? Is there a mix? And then what decides that mix? Something above both heart and intellect?
The heart is a metaphor. What I mean is your true emotional life, how you actually feel, irrespective of what you think you should be feeling. You see what I mean? We often tell ourselves, well, my life is great, everything is in order, and yet I'm massively depressed. And you can't pin it down. Your intellect doesn't have an answer, because according to the intellect, everything is okay. But your true feelings are what counts. They are your true self. The intellect is a construct on top of it. Your emotions are the foundation. And they are ultimately your real life. And you cannot escape that. So the heart is a metaphor for that. Maybe more than that, maybe the heart is the image of that particular part, that particular configuration of mind.
Well, that wouldn't, I mean, technically that wouldn't be the case unless you want to make a case that people with pacemakers lack
well, people with an
or-
artificial heart.
Right.
Yeah. So heart is a metaphor for your true emotional inner life. And then you say, well, should that be the judge? I would say the question is unnecessary, because it is how you feel. So you don't really have a choice there. Do I choose to feel that way or not? And that's our dilemma. We think the intellect has a choice, has a say on that. That if we tell ourselves, I achieved everything I wanted, so I should be happy, and therefore I am happy. Well, guess what? You don't get to choose. You may achieve everything you think you wanted, and you still may be massively depressed inside, because the life you truly live is the life of how you feel, not the life of what you think. So, in that sense, the heart is the master. Whether you admit it or not, whether you want it or not, whether you can rationalize it or not, you are living your heart. By definition, what you live is your heart, not what you think.
When the intellect is in charge, quote unquote, it's because the heart let it be.
No, well, it's never in charge. You always feel the way you feel, regardless of what you think about it. But
I'm taking this bouncer analogy too far then.
No. You feel the way you feel, but you could feel differently if only your intellect would give you permission to experience that other thing. So the intellect is a filter, but it's not how you feel. You feel the way you feel. What your intellect thinks may correlate with how you feel, but that correlation usually works the way around. You feel the way you feel, and then you look for an intellectual explanation for why you feel the way you feel.
Yeah.
But the other way around doesn't work. You can't tell yourself to be happy. You can't convince yourself that you are happy. But if you are unhappy, and you could come out of unhappiness by exploring a previously unknown room in the mansion of your mind, the intellect doesn't really close that door to you, but it convinces you that it's unnecessary to open it.
Was there a moment or an insight that brought you from that place of suffering that you experienced about a year to 3 years ago to now, or was it a gradual process?
Gradual process. Yeah, it happens under your nose. You only see it in hindsight. You look back and, oh, I have been feeling different for a few months now. Oh, interesting.
How is it that you get your ideas written? Sorry, how is it that you formulate your ideas? See, for me, writing is something that I have to force myself to do in the sense that I made it a habit. So now I do it each morning, but I had to tell myself to do that. Ideas come to me somewhat naturally, and I just write it down on my phone, so that they just spew out at any moment. Even right now, it's frantic, but writing itself it's a chore. I have to force myself to do it. So how is it that you write and formulate your idea? Sorry, what I'm trying to say is, do your ideas come almost ready-made and then it's just a matter of typing them out, or does the writing process help clarify, refine, and what does that look like? Is it just you rewriting, you vomit it out onto the paper at first and then you fix the mess? Like, pretty much, please take me through your process of writing.
It's not a choice. It doesn't happen at the time or form of my choosing. So the ideas just come with overwhelming force that makes me feel very small. But the writing process does help articulate the ideas in words. It helps me tell myself what it is that I think I know. You know what I mean? Because it's one thing to have an understanding, and it's another thing entirely different to tell yourself in words what it is that you think you understand. So the ideas come as that instantaneous understanding. Boom. There may be 3 volumes in that. But I cannot tell myself what it is that I understood until I go through the writing process.
That's super interesting, because to me, I wouldn't phrase it like that. I would say that I don't understand it until I can write it out and reread it, and then it makes sense. Like, to me, I can feel like I understood it, but it's an amorphous mess of intuition. And I guess what you're doing is you're listening to your heart. You're saying, well, you intuit it. You're correct. And I'm saying,
no,
I could be wrong.
Choice, Kurt. It's not even a choice, because as I'm writing, the reason I say that the idea comes all formed is that if I immediately start writing, I know in a overwhelming way whether what I am writing is correct or not. In other words, whether
before you write it,
during the writing, if I get too lost in my thoughts and I lose contact with the original idea that is still sitting like a ball of hot iron somewhere here, if I deviate from that very quickly, I read what I wrote and I go like, no, that's not it. So the reference is always there from the beginning. It's like I always know whether I wrote bullshit or whether I wrote something that does justice to that intuition. That's what leads me to tell you that the knowledge is there from moment zero, because I can always compare that against that feeling and know whether I'm writing nonsense or whether I'm doing justice to it. So from that point on, the work becomes one of labor. It's giving words to it. But it helps me reconcile myself with that thing that comes, because it allows me to tell myself in words what it is that I think I understood. Know what I mean? And for me, as an ego, this wording to myself of what I think I understand is very important. If for as long as I'm not able to do that, I feel an enormous urgency that doesn't let me sleep, doesn't let me focus on anything else in life. I only buy myself out of that. I only buy my freedom once it's all laid out in words. And then I feel like I've been released. It's like someone was holding a leash. I was leashed. And once I do that, I get my ticket to freedom and I'm let go until the next book comes. So it's not glamorous at all. It's not spiritual. And know what I mean? It's not this romantic vision we have about the muse and the intuition and something coming to the world through you. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happens. Something comes to the world through you. You are an instrument, but there is nothing romantic about it. It's gritty, it's sweaty, it's cruel, um, not glamorous, not romantic, not spiritual. It's like you just want to get rid of that ball of hot iron. You want to vomit it out and be rid of it and be free for a little while until the next one comes. That has always been my relationship with my writing. The impression I have is that this stuff is not me at all. This stuff is there, pregnant, somewhere in the framework behind space and time. It's sitting there and it wants to erupt, like it wants to go through a volcano, like the lava building pressure underneath. It wants to erupt, but it doesn't find a channel. Know what I mean?
Interesting.
And then I just happen to pass by and going about my business, and then, oh, that guy will do. He has some conceptual armor that will allow the translation of this hot iron, this hot lava stuff, which was a metaphor Jung himself used, this lava stuff, he would be able to give it words. So that's the instrument. So put him on a leash, don't let him go. He will be our slave now. That I'm speaking metaphorically, but that's how it feels. Like I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I got caught, and now I'm stuck.
Just because you have
this.
the right preconditions for it. So
Yeah.
the way that I'm making an analogy in my head is not with a volcano, but with lightning, and it has some charges built up, some potential, and now it's looking for some place where can it release it.
Yeah, the
And it's
place
like,
of
oh,
least
there's an arch,
resistance.
and it hurts
yeah, and
you.
it was me. Something about my background, computer engineering, artificial intelligence on the one hand, but a lot of philosophical receptive on the other. Lived in 4 countries, thinking 3 languages. Something about that probably made me the path of least resistance for lightning. And then it struck through me. Now, look, the metaphor is great in this sense. It doesn't feel good to have lightning pass through you.
I can imagine.
It feels horrible. And again, only this year I made peace with it. I stopped fighting it. I stopped thinking of it as this responsibility I didn't want to have, this thing that makes me unable to enjoy life. It gives me meaning, and I'm eternally grateful for that. My life never lacks meaning. And that's the most important thing. But it has not been pleasant for the longest of times. And making peace with that, and that's what I call the freedom of the slave. When the slave finds his freedom in a 2x2 meter cubicle without a window, now you're free, man. Nobody can take that freedom from you. If you find that freedom as a slave, leached in a cubicle without a window, if you find it there, it can never be taken away from you. And I'm glowing about it now because it's so recent. I'm sure I'll be very cynical about it a couple of years from now, and life will be rotten again, and somebody will get cancer, or I'll lose somebody I love, and it will be shit again. But right now I'm glowing because I found the freedom of the slave. I stopped pulling on the leash so I don't get hurt anymore.
And by you doing so, see, Carl Jung, you've read Jung 3 times. I've barely read a percentage of his work because it's so difficult. But when you read Jung, almost every other sentence is like a perfect quotation. And he had one that I try to live my life by. See, I used to be, and I still am, but I used to be much, much, much more egotistical and arrogant, and think that much like you when you were 34 and on top of the world and owning a company. I'm not saying that you were anywhere near as megalomaniacal as I am or was, but I would think that I want to change the world, and I would think of myself as such a savior. I'd have such a savior complex. Like, I'm gonna end suffering. I'm gonna solve global warming and even stop animals from harming each other, and give clean water to the rest of the world. Some part of that there's a good motivation, but a large part of it was unconsciously, I want to be worshipped as the savior. I want people to come to me and say, "Thank you so much, Kurt." And that was hard for me to admit. It's even hard for me to admit right now, saying it out loud. Carl Jung said that you can't, in some ways, see, this is what's so tricky about it. It's like Carl Jung would say you can't save someone. But then that means, like, well, what if they're dying on the ocean? You're not going to pull them out? What if someone's on fire? Well, it's more like psychologically you can't save someone. You could only carry your own cross. And hopefully, by example, you show them how to burden theirs.
Yes, that's spot on.
So
yeah.
Hopefully some of what I'm doing with this podcast, even with talking to you and admitting my faults and my me saying that I don't know, me not knowing much, and trying to understand these variegated fields and philosophies, and fix myself in the process. Hopefully, I can, I can shoulder my cross, and maybe some people can find some example in that.
Kurt, if I may tell you something from the heart, I don't know how you will receive it. It would have helped me when I was in a similar spot. So I'll tell you what would have helped me, which doesn't mean that it will help you at all. I would say this, my mature self would say this to my less mature self. Don't make it too complicated. Just don't take yourself too seriously. It is not all about you. You are not the sum total of what's going on. If you don't see the meaning, don't worry about it. You don't need to. You are immersed in an infinite ocean of mystery, which is touching your skin right now, and you cannot escape it. There are things that you would want to know, and you can't even articulate the question, and you're immersed in it. It's hugging you at all times, whether you want it or not. It's right on the other side of your skin. It is what you are ultimately. So just relax. Don't take yourself too seriously. What's going on is beyond what your little human rational mind can ever corral in a little story. And you gotta have faith in the true religious sense, which is trust that which you don't know and you're immersed in, all this mystery, is going somewhere worthwhile. And if it's not, there's nothing to lose. So there's no price to be paid for being wrong regarding this. So you might as well have faith. Don't take yourself too seriously, and just have faith. It will go the way it will go, and it will be fine.
Thank you. Even in that, like, not to put up some resistance, but even in that, you have some conviction. You know what you're saying, and you believe it, which means you have a framework through which to interpret the world, even if that framework has as a part of it that I can never know or comprehend the vast majority of it.
I think my biggest knowledge is knowing what I don't know. Oh, no, not even that, because not even that I know. Is knowing how much I don't know. And there is freedom in recognizing that, because a lot of anxiety and nihilism has to do with a certain narrative about what things are. And you think you know them, and that's what's confining. That's what is so crushing. When you think you know, and you think the mystery is off the table, when you think that the air you're breathing right now has been fully explained, each molecule in the air you're breathing is a mystery of unfathomable depth. And it's percolating through your body right now. So the ego thinks it will find freedom by controlling and knowing, while freedom is found in being aware of how much you do not know and allowing it to play out. In other words, I'm not saying this because I know a lot. I'm saying this because I am more aware now of how much I don't know than I was before. I thought I knew a whole bunch of stuff. Now I know that what I thought I knew is just images, phantasms, representations, appearances, how things present themselves to me, not what they are in and of themselves. I've realized that what my sensorium gives me is a dashboard, not a clear glass window into what is out there. And when you realize that, every lightning strike is a mystery of cosmic proportions, of a divine nature, let alone quasars and black holes. It brings you to tears. A dark cloud in the sky is enough to move you, to use a Christian language, to throw yourselves to your knees and thank God for existence. This realization of the unfathomable mystery that is surrounding and caressing you, for lack of a better word, at all times. It is that unknowing, that lack of control, that acceptance of our slavery condition as natural processes that don't really exist, but through which nature expresses something. It is this unknowing, lack of control and acceptance that, at least for me, that has bought me some temporary freedom. For all I know, after we stop this conversation, I will get a phone call that will destroy my life, and I will want to kill myself. For all I know,
Yeah.
that will be the case. But
Now,
right now, that's my freedom.
why did you laugh right there when you said, "For all I know, I'll get a phone call and it'll destroy my life," and then you, haha. Now, Freud would say that that's indicative of something unconscious, but I'm sure that I'm reading too much into it. Like I'm thinking too much, but I'm curious.
It was irony. It's the irony of knowing that morals are human constructs, just like our sense of fairness. That in nature there is no such a thing as justice and fairness.
I'm just such a selfish person, Bernard. Like it's so no. I mean, like I'm almost like confessing. Like if it's like if you're a priest, I, I wish I had the peace that. Now, see, what's so tricky about this is that I'm also being overly hard on myself, partly because I want to just express the worst parts of me, because I'm somewhat afraid of seeming arrogant and expressing the parts of me that I find that I'm proud of. So, for example, each year of my life since I was 26 has just gotten progressively better and better and better. And I'm married and I love my life. And I find like I love work. I love work. Like I love talking to you. Love talking to you. I love studying to talk to you. I love studying to talk to other people. I love talking to those. I love my wife. And I'm so fortunate that all I have in my life is my clean apartment, like my clean condo, super clean. I have ataxiophobia, so I don't like disorderliness or untidiness, and everything's in its own place. I have a Toyota Corolla, like a 2021 hybrid Toyota Corolla. I love my Toyota Corolla. To some people, it's like, oh, who cares about that? Oh, I love it. Love everything about my life. I feel like almost each moment is imbued with such meaning. So when I say that I'm a selfish person and I express that I am lacking in some way, I'm not falling apart, but I think I come across, or I let that part of me be seen more readily, because I'm afraid of seeming like I have it all together and seeming arrogant, and there's a part of me that's so afraid of that. And I'm just confessing. I don't have a question for me later around that.
You're being human.
And you said that, yes, I take myself too seriously. So, like, okay. I don't think I do, but I'm sure I do, because you're wiser than I am, and you must see it. And so,
like, if you're worried about what other people think of you, you're taking yourself too seriously. If it would destroy your life to be humiliated in public, you're taking yourself too seriously. Because for nature, it's just a natural process unfolding. Everything else is a narrative we place on it, a value-based judgment of our own invention. And that's why that little ironic laugh I gave, because when you get to the point where I am, there is the temptation to say I've gone through shit. Now I've arrived in a place of peace. It would be unfair if this were taken from me now.
Like
and then the next thought is, it's a cosmic giggle. It would be taken from you next second if that's how nature wants to unfold. There is no such a thing as justice. There is only a conceptualization of people who take themselves too seriously. Now, that doesn't mean that I want to defend myself or my girlfriend if somebody threatens her safety. I will kill to defend her. So I will act to preserve my functional status. I will act to preserve my life, my security, my comfort. But that too is a natural process. I will not be doing that out of some sense of intrinsic cosmic justice and God as a judge that will pass judgment fairly across all involved. I don't think that's what's going on. I think nature can be just as cruel as and ironic as any human being can. So that's why I had that little ironic giggle, because I'm in a good place right now, but I'm keenly aware the carpet can be pulled out of my feet 30 seconds from now. I may get a phone call that will destroy my world.
You have such a great outlook. And see, for me, I've been so humiliated and humbled, and I don't particularly mind public humiliation, and I've done enough self-development to overcome some of that, where you just do push-ups on the street or you yell for no reason or whatever it may be. But maybe a part of my background anxiety is the fact that I either, one, feel bad that I have such a great life, and that not only is there so much suffering, but it could be else. And at any moment, I know that there were other points in my life where right when I thought I had it figured out is when it all falls apart. And so maybe I'm wondering, do I have it too good? And then I'm wondering, like, am I just I'm thinking myself into my own suffering, but I'm not suffering that much. Like I'm way overblowing it. Maybe I want to quash.
Suffering is subjective. We should honor our suffering, even if we say, "Well, other people have it a lot worse than me." And I'm saying this because I'm guilty of it all the time. I always tell myself, "Well, my suffering is nothing compared to the suffering in Syria, to the suffering in Bangladesh, to the suffering in Africa." But in that sense, I don't do justice to myself because, for good or bad reason, I do suffer. So yeah, I wouldn't go there. But look, the most what the most insidious form of taking yourself too seriously is when you tell yourself, "Shit, I take myself too seriously and I shouldn't." That's the worst instance of taking yourself too seriously. Because if you don't take yourself too seriously, you are kind towards yourself.
It is taking yourself too seriously to say I'm taking myself too seriously?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Please explain. Because you told me that. So now if I was to listen to it, are you telling myself I would fall prey?
If you think it's so important that you shouldn't take yourself so seriously, then you are taking yourself too seriously. Otherwise, you would say, "Yeah, okay, I'm taking myself too seriously. It's what is."
Right.
I take myself too seriously. Yeah, okay.
Man, you have such
But
the
if
Eastern
you go like,
mindset.
"Oh, shit, I'm taking myself too seriously and I shouldn't. I have to do something about it." What do you think that is? It's you taking yourself extra seriously.
Okay.
So not taking yourself too seriously doesn't imply it entails being kind to yourself. Giving yourself a pass.
Man,
Forgiving.
Yeah, you're much more wise than I, and I know you gotta go, and I'm sorry I keep you. I want to tell you and I want to give you a piece of imagery. I was watching the Da Vinci Code, and the first one, there's this guy. He looked like Neil Patrick Harris. He's like pale skinned, white. Okay, and he was just praying. Yeah, okay, he's praying, and he's taking a whip and chastising himself, like self mortification, and then he's portrayed as the crazy one because of that. And I remember watching that movie and thinking, no, we're the crazy ones because we're not taking life seriously. This guy is atoning for each sin painfully and specifically. And I'm like, that's like, I wish I was as courageous as that. Now, you're probably hearing that and thinking I'm worshiping the wrong God in a sense.
I think there is a crucial distinction between taking yourself too seriously and taking life seriously. I wouldn't do the former, but I absolutely recommend the latter. Taking yourself too seriously is not helpful, neither to nature nor to what you think you are. Taking life seriously is a whole other game. It's very important. And in some sense, you can only take life seriously if you don't take yourself too seriously. Because if yourself consumes life, then you're not taking life seriously. Life is something that happens through you. If you make it all about you, you're not making it about life. Do you see what I mean?
Okay, see, Tony Robbins has this phrase, life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. But then you just put a twist on that, well, an ancient twist, but you're saying it's not happening to you, nor is it happening for you, it's happening through you.
Yeah, Tony Robbins and a lot of the self-help literature and a lot of the New Age and spiritual literature, it's all about consolation by creating the illusion that your ego is in control of the world and that the universe is some kind of menu and you can just place your order. And if you place your order in just the right way by thinking the right thoughts and applying the right techniques, then you get everything your ego wants. I personally think that's bullshit. Utter, complete, and unhelpful, demeaning bullshit. I don't think that's the way to go about
destructive too, not just unhelpful.
Destructive, yeah. It elevates the ego to the position of king of an illusory reality, and it will hurt you ultimately. Although it may give you a sense of comfort in the beginning,
in the short term, right?
And it will wreck the planet if everybody tries to do that. So look. When I told you I don't take yourself too seriously, I didn't mean not to take life seriously. On the contrary, I think life is to be taken very seriously, and the way to go about it is to let it flow through you and not try to wrestle control of it and make it about yourself.
There are just a few questions from the audience, and I want to ask you them. You could just answer them shortly. I know you got to go.
Okay. We've gone so far, so
okay. Yeah, might as well. Just a few more minutes, right? Khalil and Danny, PhD, Islamic Studies, that's his username, says, Dr. Kastrup, if mind at large is active, evolving, and excited, as reflected in natural processes, doesn't your model still need to account for a higher level explanation or cause for this activity?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood it, so I copy and pasted it and thought maybe when I read it out loud it would make sense. Dr. Kastrup, if life is evolving, if it's active, it's excited, as reflected in natural processes, doesn't your model still need to account for a higher...
Yeah, I don't think so. I think life is doing what it's doing, or the universe is doing what it's doing, because it is what it is. It's an implication from identity. What the universe is determines how it will behave. So it's doing what it's doing because it is what it is. And we can model that behavior and predict it through mathematical equations and science and all that. But these are models. They are not the reason or the explanation or the impetus behind the behavior. I think the impetus of the behavior is what mind is. And I don't really think we need more than that. In a sense, it's trying to push reduction beyond where it needs to go. Once you get to what the universe is, what else do we need to make sense of its behavior? It's behaving the way it does because it is what it is. And we can model that behavior and predict, that's all fine. Now, if the intuition behind the question is that there has to be some grander, higher level plan, some carefully thought out fine-tuning or carefully thought out action, I don't think that needs to be the case. I think the unfolding or the evolution can be purely instinctive, driven by archetypes, and archetypes are just reflections of what the universe is. The only point that shuns me a little bit is the fine-tuning of the universal constants, which suggest a ridiculously fine level of planning, if interpreted at face value. Why are the universal constants so exquisitely fine-tuned to the rise of complexity and life? I don't have an answer to that, but the most promising avenue to make sense of that that I have learned of recently is the work of a physicist called Marcus Miller from the Austrian Academy of Sciences. We covered his work a lot on the Essentia Foundation website recently. And basically what he's saying is that he's a quantum physicist, and his take on quantum physics is that the physical world is actually created from a first-person perspective, that we sort of inferentially build it. And then he has a mathematical argument that if that's what's going on, then we would automatically tend to infer physical worlds that are consistent with each other's. In other words, you would construct a personal physical world of your own. I would construct one for myself through inference, and they would necessarily be consistent with one another. Your world would be more or less the same as mine because of the dynamics of the inferential processes going on. So basically what he's saying is that the fine-tuning of the universal constants, that's my interpretation of what he's saying. I asked him the question directly, and he said he hadn't thought about it yet. So I don't want to put these words in his mouth. My interpretation of what he's doing is that if physics arises from a first-person perspective, in other words, if the physical world is emergent and not absolute, which is what quantum physics is suggesting, more than suggesting right now, then the fact that the universal constants are fine-tuned are simply a consequence of the fact that we are inferring the physical world. So you would necessarily infer a physical world that accounts for our existence because we are the ones inferring it. And therefore, the universal constants would necessarily be fine-tuned because without it, we couldn't account for our existence. So we wouldn't infer that
sounds like the anthropic principle.
It's not quite the anthropic principle, but I understand that at first sight it
It's
would
almost like
seem
we're
like
giving
that.
birth to a specific world rather than there are a variety of worlds and we're the only one that we could
Yes.
comprehend. Okay.
Yes. So he's not saying he's not adhering to solipsism. He admits that you have a conscious inner life, I do, and everybody else does. He's not a solipsist. All he's saying is that the physical world, not all possible worlds, but the physical world arises through an inferential process. We infer what the physical world is in order to account for our own existence. And if that happens, then mathematically you can prove that we would all end up inferring the same physical world, more or
That's
less.
absolutely interesting. So I'll look into that. Marcus Miller.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, Plastic Pears says, hell yeah, right up my alley. Thanks for getting Bernardo on the show. If consciousness is beyond localization, does that imply that the brain is like a radio tuner?
Look, I think the radio metaphor is useful if you're coming from a dualist background or a pure materialist background. It helps you think about the issues we are talking about. I don't think it is ultimately true, though, because it's a dualist metaphor. There is the signal and there is the tuner, and they are separate things. Like if the brain is a filter, then the brain itself cannot be made of consciousness. Otherwise, can you talk about a coffee filter made of coffee? You can't. It would filter nothing. A coffee filter made of coffee wouldn't work. So if I say that everything is consciousness, then even the brain is merely the image of certain conscious processes. It's the image of the thing. And as such, it cannot filter consciousness because it is itself consciousness. Now, I think what's happening is that the brain is the image of a dissociative process in consciousness. And dissociation happens in a way that can... Things happen because of dissociation as if the brain were a filter. If you see what I mean. Because the brain is the image of a dissociative process, things happen as if it were a filter because dissociation is exclusive. It excludes certain things. It creates a boundary and it differentiates what's in from what's out. And that's like a kind of filtering in which you let certain things in and you keep other things out. So things work as if the brain were a filter. And that's the sense in which I think the metaphor is useful. But the brain is not literally a filter because you cannot have a coffee filter made of coffee. And for the same reason, you cannot have a filter of consciousness be made of consciousness. Mm-hmm. I think it's just an image of a dissociative process that works as if it were a filter.
And when you say it's an image of a dissociative process as seen from the second person on a first person, there's a first person perspective associated with it. What tripped me up initially, and maybe this will help some other people, is that when we think of mind, we tend to think of our example of mind, within our head. I know you don't like the within our head aspect, but the way that thoughts relate to other thoughts, it's volutinous and indistinct and equivocal. So how could something as precise and serene as paper and the natural laws of physics come from mind? Well, I guess I'm posing that as a question, but that's my way of saying it out loud to clarify for some of the audience members who are wondering, how could this all be in mind, given that our own example of mind is nowhere near as precise as the external world seems to be?
Our individual mind has arisen from evolutionary processes through cooperation and competition in an ecosystem. And because of that, our mind is largely reactive. It works in an impulsive, reactive, unstable way because it has helped us survive. If a tiger would be stalking you, it would help you survive to react very quickly to any sign that the tiger might be stalking you. You'd have to react to things to survive. Some forms of impulsive behavior are also conducive to survival. They allow for quicker reaction time, reproduction. It's nice to be hopelessly in love with someone that will guarantee reproduction. So you cannot compare the dispositions of our human mind, which have been shaped by competitive and collaborative pressures through evolution. You cannot compare the more or less voluble and reactive character of our augmentation to the mentation of a mind that has never undergone these competitive pressures. That other mind does not need to react to an environment, does not need to react to threats, does not need to fall in love, because it's what there is. There is nothing outside it. It's what there was, there is, and there always will be. So that mind has no reason to become reactive and trigger happy, like our minds is, or voluble like our minds are, because it didn't have to survive an ecosystem and compete and react to external influences. So how would it be instead? It would be exactly what it seems to be, quite stable, unfolding very predictably according to its own mental archetypes. And we know it's stable because we can model the behavior of nature. It doesn't change its laws from one day to the other. It seems to behave quite stably. And what is a stable mind? It's an instinctive mind. I'll offer you an example. Even lower animals, not too low, even crocodiles, have very instinctive minds that are to some extent reactive. They will react fast to threats, but that fast reaction is predictable. Crocodiles are incredibly predictable. You can measure what distance between them and you they have to be at in order to try to lunge at you. If the distance is higher than that, they will not even try. If it's shorter than that, they are guaranteed to try to lunge at you and eat you. So instinctive minds are very predictable minds. In the case of the universe, I think it's instinctive, but in addition to that, it's not reactive either, because it's all there is. It doesn't have anything to have to react to. And that seems to be exactly how it behaves.
Mm-hmm. What occurs to me right now with this instinctual metaphor is that it seems like there's a bit of assuming what you're trying to prove there. So for example, let's take a fly, and then you shine some photons on the right side, and then its wings on the left move. Okay, the way we explain that is mechanistically and without mind, traditionally. So then this would be an example of either demonstrating that the universe is mechanistic at its core, or that you're saying, well, mind is what is mechanistic, but I'm asking you about the mechanistic aspect of mind.
I know exactly where you're coming from. You're saying, aren't you just projecting onto reality what you expect to see in reality? And it's making a theory unfalsifiable. When you manage to construe every piece of evidence in the light of your theory, then you turn it into something unfalsifiable. Some people, I am a believer in evolution by natural selection. I don't think it's random, but I think evolution by natural selection happens. And some people who are in favor of evolution by natural selection make it unfalsifiable, because you see, if the bird of paradise has these super colorful feathers that make it obvious in an environment, it's because it attracts mates that way. By making itself very conspicuous, it will attract mates. Mates will see him, and he will be more attractive. That's why it has colorful feathers.
Then,
But if it's a black bird that you can hardly see, it's boring to death, then no, it survives because it's camouflaged and the predators can see. So you can make the theory unfalsifiable if you go down this path. Luckily, that's not what we are doing today to defend the theory of evolution. There are genetic studies, there are experimental studies, so it runs a little deeper than that. But I am sensitive to this idea of turning a theory into something unfalsifiable by interpreting everything favorably. I don't think that is what I'm doing, and I'll tell you why. If I start from the premises of the theory, everything is mental and we are part of mind, but nature at large is also mental in nature, what would you expect to be the case based on what we know about life, the universe, and everything? I would be surprised if nature were voluble, unpredictable, and reactive under the framework of my theory, because it wouldn't fit with my theory. Because you see, our minds have undergone very different shaping forces and dynamics than a mind that has never needed to undergo evolution. So the theory suggests or implies that these two types of mind, the dissociated one and a natural one, should behave very differently, because one has undergone the pressures of natural selection and the other didn't. So I think what we are observing is a direct... I think that the universe is predictable and behaves itself differently than our own minds is what you would expect if the theory I am proposing is correct. Anything
I
else
see,
would
I
sort
see.
of contradict it, because then you would say, well, how can these minds be the same? One has undergone the pressures of natural selection and the other hasn't. So by what miracle are they the same? It would be dissonant. It wouldn't be nice. So I don't, yeah.
Sorry, have you thought of a prediction that is falsifiable for your framework of the world? Your conceptualization of the metaphysics? I know this is tricky. This even
If
plagues
there were,
string
yeah,
theory.
but I can mention a few. They are on the edge of what technology allows us to measure. But I can mention a few. If we were not aware of any experiential state whose richness and intensity is not directly correlated to the degree of brain activity, then I would say, well, it doesn't immediately falsify my theory, but under my theory, if our individual minds are dissociated processes, then there should be some mental states that correspond to a reduction of dissociation, therefore less brain activity, but enrich the experience because now you have the cognitive inferential links. So the theory would expect that at least some experiential states would break the correlation between richness of experience and the degree of brain activity. Most of the time, they will go together, but there should be some states in which the reduction of brain activity is a reduction of the dissociation itself.
I imagine you can say near-death experience is an example of this.
No, psychedelics. Well, there are thousands. There are lots of examples. Psychedelics, hyperventilation, the choking game, erotic strangulation, G-force induced loss of consciousness, trance states, all of these things, brain injury, acquired savant syndrome, collateral damage from brain surgery. I have done it before. I have listed like 24 papers that show that these are all instances in which you have reduced or impaired brain activity accompanied by enriched experience.
While we're on the subject of erotic asphyxiation, so is there something about sex that is actually oneness? So people say that, well, I feel one with my partner. Is that actually occurring? Is it like the ramified branches of the leaves and they're coming closer? Or is it just a perception of that?
Oneness never ceases to occur. It's always the case, but some activities may bring you closer to the recognition of it. And I have no doubt that sexual ecstasy brings you quite close to the recognition of the oneness. That is the case all the time. It's there all the time. We just don't sense it clearly. We don't pay attention to it. We're not open to it. And sexual ecstasy sort of brings that recognition to you. Other activities as well. But, it's not for nothing that in the subcontinent, there we go again, Tantra is a spiritual path based on sexual ecstasy. These guys realized something there. They are onto something.
Can you feel this oneness without feeling any euphoria attached? That is the opposite. Like, can you feel dysphoria?
I don't think euphoria is inherent in nature. I think the euphoria we feel when in close proximity to the recognition of oneness has to do with a kind of relief. Because the dissociated state, we are used to it, so we don't recognize it anymore for how difficult and taxing it is. Wonderful. How much energy it requires to remain dissociated. And when we come to the recognition of oneness, it's like that natural process sort of relaxes and allows itself to be what it naturally is without that tension, that energy, that effort required to mold it in that particular form. And we register that because of the contrast as bliss. Because in comparison to the taxing state we are in by the mere fact that we are alive, in comparison to that, it is blissful. But I don't think it's inherently blissful in the absence of that contrastual reference, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Okay, everyone, me and Bernardo, we have to go. What time is it there, Bernardo?
It's 10 to 10, and I haven't had dinner yet. We are talking since 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
so we've been
almost 5 hours.
About 5 hours.
Holy moly. Well, this is probably the best podcast I've ever had the pleasure of not only taking part in, but listening to. So,
thank you, sir. It's an honor then. I'm glad I contributed to this achievement.
Yeah, thank you. How was it for you?
It's been fun. If it hadn't been, I wouldn't have been talking to you for 5 hours. So that's the proof that I think it has been very constructive, positive, and very enjoyable.
We'll take one question. If you can write this quickly. Someone named Cecily said, what's the relationship between the universal consciousness and the Platonic realm?
I think the motivation for Sir Roger's postulation of the Platonic realm is that there seem to be some built-in dispositions in nature, some built-in patterns of behavior. And then he postulates this Platonic realm to account for those regularities, which he cannot see in the mental world alone or in the physical world alone. I don't see the need to make that distinction. I think the regularities he sees, the Platonic principles, so to say, are merely the archetypes of the natural mind, the inherent dispositions or the natural frequencies of vibration or the inherent harmonics of the natural mind, which are what they are by virtue of mind being what it is. In other words, you don't need an ontologically distinct realm to account for those regularities. They are accounted for by the fact that mind is what it is. It had to be something. And to be something, it has to have certain properties. And those regularities are those properties. You don't need something outside mind to account for them. They represent what mind is.
Does science require materialism in any way, or does logic plus information produce the same predictive power?
Science has never required materialism. It's a method of study based on rational reasoning and, most of all, empirical experimentation and observation. None of this requires any metaphysical commitment of any sort, because all of this is about how nature behaves and how we can predict nature's behavior. None of it implies a commitment to a particular position about what nature is in and of itself. We cannot have access to nature as it is in and of itself, other than the access we have to ourselves as parts of nature. And on the basis of that access, the only thing we can say is that just like we are mental beings from within, so is the rest of nature. But science is based on an observation of behavior, cataloging and modeling the regularities of nature's behavior. That does not require materialism or any metaphysical commitment, also not idealism, that can be based on that can be done on a complete metaphysical vacuum. It's just that human beings are not perfect. We always need a metaphysical narrative to inform our actions. So in practice, many scientists work under the assumptions of materialism. But that is not science. That is the prejudices of the people who practice science. But science as an ideal method, as defined and enshrined in our culture as a method, is completely metaphysics agnostic. We don't need any metaphysics to make science successful. I would argue that it has much more chances to be successful, even more successful than it already is, if we eliminate metaphysics from it. If we keep ourselves really open to every possibility and just look at what science can tell us, which is the behavior of nature, we would explore avenues of research that today we ignore because our hidden metaphysical assumptions tell us that they are impossible and they will produce nothing. Well, how do we know? We never looked at it. We think they're impossible because of metaphysical assumptions. Science would be better off without any metaphysics, certainly without materialism.
Thank you, Bernard. Get some rest. Get something to eat. I've been fasting, so I'm gonna break my fast as well. And
thank you, man. It's been quite an experience. I'm grateful to you. It's not been a usual interview. I give 4 interviews per week, and usually it's the same thing, and this has not been that. So I'm grateful to you. Thanks a lot.
I'm grateful to you, and hopefully the mind at large can bless me with a hairline like yours, because I'm balding.
Don't take yourself too seriously.
I am looking for some, so if anyone knows some treatments for that, I'm looking into follicle, something FUE. We'll see. Okay, where can people find out more about you? And that's
BernardoCastrup.com.
Have a good one, man. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye-bye. My background's in math and physics. I did my undergrad in that, and then I went into filmmaking. I'm pretty much a filmmaker since. And now I've always had something called the theory of everything in the back of my mind. Like, first of all, I want to get an entire view of the landscape of theories of everything and then pull and make a confection of my own theory. Perhaps I won't, but at least I want to understand all the theories and give an overview to the audience as well. And that's actually, it's not simple at all. It's taking almost all my time. So if I seem like I am tired, it's because I don't know why, but well, Bernardo, I can tell you about this afterwards. I had not a trip, but something akin to a trip that just it sent me in this spiral, this loop of a panic attack. I've never had a panic attack before. And it had to do with me thinking I'm crazy because I heard a voice. I thought I heard a voice, like I was half sleeping. So I thought I heard my wife say okay or yes, and she could have, but I don't know if she did. And I was half sleeping anyway. And then I thought, am I going crazy? And since then, for it's maybe 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I've had trouble sleeping because it's difficult for me to sit with my own thoughts, and I don't want to take sleeping medication. It's so addictive. So I've had trouble sleeping, and I'm intensely studying for you, intensely studying for some other people, and it's compounding and compounding, and I feel like I'm wearing myself so thin. And luckily, after this, I can breathe a big sigh of relief because I don't have to prep. And maybe we can even do a part two, but just so you know, that's where I'm coming from in my mindscape.
Yeah, look, these big questions are very dangerous questions. This has been known throughout the history of humanity that this is dangerous, sacred ground to tread on. They can be all consuming because they have to do with what we really, really are. And there is vertigo involved in even contemplating that space. So it's not surprising that this has happened to you. It has happened to me, has happened to nearly every worthwhile philosopher for whom philosophy is a way of life, not just a job. So this is known. Although it may be unfamiliar to you, you're not alone in treading this minefield.
Thank you, thank you. That does help. Something that doesn't help is knowing that people like Cantor drove himself mad by studying infinity, or at least that's what he said. And I'm wondering how much of this, with me delving into the depths of reality, which is like the depths of myself as well, is going to bring about psychosis, and I don't want that. And I had an experience once about 1.5 years ago, and what happened was I was typing, and then it said, "Yes, you're not the only one. Ha, I'm here," like on its own. And I watched it, I'm like, shoot, is there another part of me? And then I immediately got up and I felt waves of anxiety, and I had to, then I was like, shoot, I don't want to feel like this. I don't want to have this experience through the rest of my life because I have a wife. I love my life. I don't want to be crazy. And something that you mentioned, which is known in the literature, is that psychosis is not necessarily a mental disorder, but an incompatibility between you and the culture. And I can imagine that people who, if I was to go to a psych ward and talk to schizos, that they would say, yes, yes, this is not what it is, this is not, and then people would think they're crazy, but I would be like, no, 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 they're actually onto something. They're the true enlightened ones. It's just we who aren't able to accept it. And I didn't want to go to a ward. And then I was like, I don't want another part of my mind to tell me to kill myself or to kill someone. And I'm not suicidal in the least. But coming from a place of a different part of me telling me what to do, I was worried. And then I took some lorazepam to calm me down. And then I had to go downstairs to the concierge and say, "Can you call me an ambulance?" I was alone, right? And then they did, and they were like freaked out. And I was talking to people saying, "Look, I know that this sounds crazy. I'm not crazy, but I don't want to kill myself." And there was a police officer there at one point. I'm like, "I just want you to know, I don't want to reach for your gun. I don't know what I'm gonna do." Like, and the police officer was like, "Oh, that's fine. You're okay. You're okay." And then as soon as the ambulance came, checked my heart, I felt calm. But since then, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to, oh man, Bernardo, man, like, I don't want to question reality. But at the same time, my job is it. Like, doing this is it.
Once you open that Pandora's box, you cannot put the demons back. The way to go about it is to learn how to deal with the demons in a functional way that doesn't take you out of life in society. But our normal state of consciousness is adaptive. It's not made to give you access to truth. It's made to adapt you to the circumstances of our living. Even our cultural consciousness is adaptive as well. It allows you to get a job, to be a reliable co-worker, to be a reliable partner and father. So I don't poo-poo psychotic states of consciousness as obviously untrue. Not any more than this state of consciousness right now is also untrue, if you know what I mean. I wouldn't go as far as to romanticize psychosis, as to think that people undergoing psychosis are enlightened. I think mind has this proclivity to deceive itself in many different ways, and that's another way of deception as well. Could they have access to information that is real and to which we do not ordinarily have access? Very well, that's possible. Yes, very well possible. But the important thing is what people make of it. And that's where people go wrong. It's trying to interpret that information and weaving a story about that. That story can be highly dysfunctional and deceptive. It can be literally untrue. So we have to make this distinction between accessing untreaded ground in the river of mind, which is just outside the boundaries of what is functional and adaptive, and interpreting what you access in those altered states of consciousness. And I think people tend to go faulty in the interpretation. It's what people call psychedelic gnosis, that if they have a hallucination about talking to aliens in the Pleiades, they come back and say, well, there are aliens in the Pleiades very interested in our elections and the results of our political system. Well, I wouldn't go that far because mind has this inherent seems to have this inherent drive to deceive itself because that's how it creates reality.